I just don't see it. I just don't see a realistic scenario where West Virginia can actually beat Penn State.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Penn State is a 10.5-point favorite for a reason. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Adam Sheetz is back, former Penn State men's basketball insider, also covered football, baseball, many other sports for Penn State's Comm Radio. He is now a graduate, so if there are any businesses that are looking for a professional sportscaster out there, he is your guy. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let us know down in the comments what your early predictions are for Penn State versus West Virginia. As we're just going to go through this game, West Virginia fans seem pretty confident. Adam, I just don't see it. I really don't see a lot of scenarios. Now, anything is possible, but I do not see a realistic scenario that happens more often than not where West Virginia wins this game. Penn State just has a better matchup and is able to match up well with West Virginia's strengths. Against any other opponent, I think West Virginia could pull off an unthinkable upset here. But there is a reason why Penn State is a double-digit favorite here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it on paper, I mean, Penn State's talent, is going to overwhelm West Virginia just like it did last year. And we saw that in the game open in the year. Penn State was able to win that game handily and cover the spread. I think the one path West Virginia, you're hoping is Penn State. There's a lot of new there. It's a road game to start, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. So maybe Penn State has some growing pains going into the game. Maybe West Virginia can get up to a lead because they have a lot of continuity on their staff. They're bringing a lot of the guys back from last season outside of their secondary, which we'll get into later. But definitely on paper, you look at Penn State, they're a much better team on talent, and it's just a matter of putting everything together, see how the coordinators get going. If Penn State can, click on all cylinders to start the year. But, it's a road game to start. Penn State, they've had this situation twice before. Not going to say West Virginia is the Purdue or Wisconsin that we've seen Penn State play on the road to start the year, but Penn State's had some trouble there, so maybe there's that path if you're trying to be confident and paint a West Virginia picture for them to win this game. But definitely not an easy one for the Mountaineers playing a Penn State team that's really looking to bounce back. I think they have a sour taste in their mouth with the way that season ended last year, losing to Michigan, Ohio State in the ways they did in games they probably could have won and maybe should have won and unable to get it done. I think this is a very hungry Penn State team with a new playoff format that's ready to get out there and kind of punch their ticket to the playoffs, something they've never been in. And I think it's going to be a very motivated Penn State team. West Virginia is going to try to paint a path. They've got some vets. They returned the quarterback. They have some running backs that are really talented. But, you just look at it on paper, Penn State's talent should be able to overwhelm the Mountaineers.
Well, and that's just what happened last year. And I'm glad you brought up the change in coordinators. But Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen aren't exactly drop-offs from, Mike Yurcich. We obviously know that is an upgrade. But you're going from Manny Diaz, who was not that successful of a head coach, but revitalized his career as a defensive coordinator. I think the exact same mold fits here for Tom Allen. And the team itself is the personnel. So you have Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen that they're not going to totally overhaul the system. They're going to make tweaks to the offense. They're going to make tweaks to the defense. There's going to be some different terminology, but it's not like this is a complete 180 from what Penn State did last year. Penn State still has Drew Allar. Penn State still has Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. You essentially swap out Julian Fleming in for Keandre Lambert-Smith, but you have Trey Wallace. You have Liam Clifford. You have Caden Saunders. You have Tyler Warren. The only thing that's really different is the offensive line. So, okay, you look at I've said that a lot on this podcast. I've said that Penn State's offensive line could be one of its biggest weaknesses, if not the biggest weakness going into 2024. That's a fair statement to make. But how much better is West Virginia's defensive line to where that's going to prove? I think that's just going to be a standstill. Those two are going to offset each other. That's like Penn State's going to win some up front. West Virginia is going to win some up front, but they don't have this overwhelming talent that it's just going to be able to contain Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen inside of the front seven.
Yeah, and Andy Kotelnicki's a veteran offensive coordinator, as you said. So he's
Mm-hmm.
a guy who might be able to, hide the offensive line a little bit early in the year before they kind of get their legs under them and kind of learn how to play together and things like that. Run more quick passes for Drew Allar, get the ball out quick, get some runs outside or inside the tackles, find holes and schemes that work well with the offensive line he has. I don't think the offensive line is going to be that big of an issue because they're really good in last year's game. They lose a little bit, but West Virginia isn't adding in a great defensive line to go up against that offensive line of Penn State to really challenge them. And those two running backs Penn State has, Singleton and Allen, should be able to do what they've been able to do in big games and expect them to have another big one. And I mean, that's kind of the thing. As you mentioned, matchup wise, West Virginia, you look at it, they're a team that won 9 games last year. They have a lot of momentum. A lot of people thought Neil Brown was going to get fired last year, especially after the Penn State game. But, he was able to really fix that ship and get everything right for West Virginia, coming off a bowl game win against North Carolina. But I think a lot of it looks into matchups, as you said, Zach. And against other teams, maybe you think, West Virginia can pull it off. They have, the vets and things they can do. But matchup-wise, a Penn State team that, like you said, is hungry. This is a big game for West Virginia, probably their biggest home game, especially in the non-conference. They get Pitt on the road this year, so Penn State coming in is going to be huge. It's a noon kickoff. Big noon kickoff will be there for Fox. But, I mean, just everything matchup-wise, and you look at it on paper, Penn State should be able to overwhelm the West Virginia Mountaineers. Just a matter of putting that on paper and playing the game they're capable of playing.
I mean, a road trip is no fun to open the season, right? I think Morgantown is one of the better environments in all of college football. I'm glad this game, from a Penn State perspective, is at noon as opposed to a night game in West Virginia. When I look at West Virginia, I think they're a good team. Believe me, it's not because West Virginia's terrible. West Virginia's not talented. They can't coach themselves out of a wet paper bag. That's not now. If you asked me maybe 2 years ago, I have a different opinion of Neil Brown. But again, he's revitalized what he has going in West Virginia. But this team, when I say I've already gone out and said that they are the same. They are the same. Garrett Greene is back at quarterback. The offensive line is really good. I think they're one of the better ones in the nation as well. They have, as you mentioned already, the really good running backs. Donaldson, is a bruising running back, right? Penn State's defense is going to be a little banged up after that one. They averaged over 5 yards per carry last time around, and I would expect the same. But Penn State is used to that. That is a majority of the Big Ten. Well, a former Big Ten, maybe, because you have USC, UCLA. But you get my point. Is Penn State's familiar with that? Penn State's faced that. Tom Allen knows how to scheme for it, right? Mm-hmm. So when they've already played better versions of West Virginia, heck, Penn State does it themselves. Adam, Penn State has the identical game plan because West Virginia, what is West Virginia going to put up 30, 40 points? No, there is not a scenario where I see the Mountaineers scoring more than 24. Like, that is the absolute maximum. And I anticipate Penn State getting into the 30s, definitely over 28. So with Penn State, they know what West Virginia wants to do. And West Virginia, it's not like they can keep up if Penn State's offense starts to open it up and goes and gets into a bit of a shootout mode, if you will, because that's not West Virginia's game. They're ground and pound, ball control. They rely on being a physical team. They can't run up and down the field at will, and Penn State's defense has the talent to at least neutralize what West Virginia is good at.
Yeah, and I think, the game playing you're going to see for West Virginia is going to be similar to what Michigan tried to do against Penn State. Obviously not going to be as successful. They don't have Michigan's team from last year that went 15-0 and won the national championship. But
because of that, part of that was that defense.
Yeah.
The defense was able to help set up the offense. But continue. Good point.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just they're not that team, but they're going to try to, I expect, fourth and shorts, leave the offense out there, try to really maintain that possession, limit Penn State's opportunity, maybe force Drew Allar, maybe, who's looked for a big year for him this year, maybe look for him to press a little bit, try to force him to press, be like, not getting many opportunities, got to make them when we get them, and kind of you'll really keep that Penn State offense off field, tire out that Penn State defense. That's going to be the plan I think Neil Brown's going to try to do. Now, it's easier said than done. This Penn State defensive line is loaded. They're deep on the defensive line. Now, if you can get to linebackers, we mentioned the last time we talked, the linebackers aren't maybe where they need to be, especially early in the year. They're going to be a group that's going to get better as the season goes on. But, I mean, this is a offense that's going to try to ground and pound, try to maintain the possession. I think they'll want a 40-20, time possession battle in favor of West Virginia. And all this stuff is just to, keep the game close and give West Virginia an opportunity to win it. And you would think most teams, if you get that type of discrepancy in time possession, it'd be a runaway win. West Virginia needs all that just to keep it close. So it's going to be a tough battle. As you mentioned, it's just the game plan just really doesn't match up with Penn State's strengths and how they might be able to handle West Virginia.
West Virginia would need all of that and then some to win this game. Could they cover the spread? Absolutely. I think 10.5 is it's teetering on, that 50-50 mark. But if West Virginia were to pull off the upset, they need a lot to go in its favor. We're going to discuss the hypothetical scenario of how that could actually happen on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have come to an end, we get fewer games and the sports aren't exactly sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going, lets me stay in the game whenever I want. And all I got to do is open up the app, dream up some bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. So there's something for everyone each and every day, all summer long. And all you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. You want to look ahead, Penn State versus West Virginia. Penn State is the 10.5 point favorite. It's a minus 375 on the money line. West Virginia would be plus 290. If you want to bet on the Mountaineers, the total is set at 49.5. If you like any of those odds, you can bet them now at FanDuel.com. And of course, FanDuel has options for Major League Baseball, Wimbledon, the WNBA, and so much more. Again, all you got to do is go over to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Adam, it's very difficult for me to envision a scenario where West Virginia does pull off this win. I mean, a lot could go wrong for Penn State. I mean, we're talking injuries. We're talking, like you said, severe chemistry issues. But with the veteran head coach and Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen now taking over the coordinator roles, I can't see that happening when you have an experienced quarterback. If this was 1 year ago, if this is Drew Allar's first road start, different story. Same thing. Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, all those guys, Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, the likes of now Cam Miller seeing an increase in playing time, KJ Winston, those guys, it was their first road experience against Ohio State, and and it showed. If that was the case for West Virginia this time around, but it's not. So that's what I mean. Penn State would need to turn the ball over 3 or 4 times. You just have a case of fumbleitis. Drew Allar were to throw 2 interceptions. I don't like speaking this into existence, but that's what would have to happen because West Virginia, again, can't score points at will. They move the football in increments. They continue drives, and they want to carry out 10, 11, 12 play drives to try to tire out your defense. Well, Penn State, again, they do the same thing, and they protect the football doing it. They limit their penalties. And what you're hoping is different now is that the scheme from Andy Kotelnicki opens things up even more. So Penn State's offense struggled a season ago. It's supposed to be better this year. So again, what can West Virginia, Adam, in your mind, possibly do where they do win this game more often than not? Because it's just not realistic.
I mean, I think, the two big things, anytime you look for upsets and you're trying to think in point spread 10.5 points, obviously this would be a big upset. You look for turnovers and you look for special teams plays. And I mean, that's what they're going to need. Maybe you get a kick turned to a touchdown. Maybe Penn State muffs a punt here or there. And, you get those turnovers. I mean, you're asking Penn State to do something that, as bad as the offense was last year and how much they struggled, they did not turn the ball over. That's why they were so good against the teams they were significantly better than on a talent roster. They were able to beat those teams up just by taking care of the ball, running it, really wearing you down as the game goes on. And that's why they're able to open up big leads against these teams and win those games. Didn't work against Ohio State and Michigan, but West Virginia isn't an Ohio State or Michigan caliber team. Penn State has that big talent gap against the Mountaineers. So, I mean, they're going to have to force turnovers. They're going to have to limit explosive plays because this was the one game last year where you watched Penn State. You're like, oh, they were actually pretty explosive. I mean, they had the big play to Keandre Lambert-Smith to open the game for a touchdown. They were able to get down the field and do things. Now, that kind of dwindled off as the season went on, but this is the one team they were able to be very successful with in that Mike Yurcik scheme. The one thing, again, you mentioned the chemistry issues. Does Andy Kotelnicki try to be explosive? Because, every Penn State fan is going to be sitting there, and if Penn State, does what probably is the smart thing to do in this game from a game plan perspective and take care of the football and work long drives and tire out that West Virginia defense and just kind of wear on them, which is the way Penn State played last year, that is a way to win this game, maybe the easiest way for Penn State to win this game. But do they try to get maybe a little more explosive, take some risk, and could West Virginia jump on that? But again, this is a lot of Penn State doing things very uncharacteristically of what they've done in the past. Even when they've struggled, this is something they haven't really done. So it's really hard to picture the path unless Penn State really tries to hand the game to West Virginia. And I mean, they're a veteran team. Garrett Greene's a veteran quarterback who I think is very innovative. He's got really good legs. He doesn't throw the ball a lot. Again, they're a ground first team, but if they're able to have success, open up play action, they can be explosive in the pass game with their receivers from the play action fakes outside of, the fake and the threat to run that Garrett Greene is. So I think that makes things interesting. But again, as we said, Zach, it takes a lot of things to go right just for West Virginia to have a chance in the fourth quarter to win this game.
Yeah, they got to keep it close, and that's the idea. Is can you keep it close and force Penn State to make unnecessary mistakes? A season ago, if this is on the road, it's a little different. But now all those players are more experienced. And again, people are saying the same thing. Well, Garrett Greene should be better, and Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson. It's like, okay, I would agree with that. But you lost some of your better offensive linemen. Penn State was able to revitalize its defensive ends. Okay, Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac go off to the NFL, but they moved Abdul Carter down, right? That's strategic. And then you have Deni Dennis Sutton coming into his own, and Jameel Lyons is supposed to be that next breakout candidate at defensive end. West Virginia's biggest problem is not its offense, it's its defense. Can it limit and force mistakes from Penn State's offense? And you overhauled the secondary for a good reason. West Virginia wasn't going to be better. It wasn't going to improve itself if it didn't overhaul the secondary. But I also look at West Virginia's offense, and it's like, okay, the offensive line takes a slight step back. I think Wyatt Milam, I've heard rave reviews about him. He's supposed to be a future first-round pick. Some people have argued that he might be the best left tackle in college football purely. Okay, great, but that's one player on the line of scrimmage. Remember, Penn State's defense was top 5 in rush yards allowed per attempt in all of college football, going up against Michigan, going up against Ohio State, going up against the Big Ten, where it's run first, and then run a little more. So if that's the case, and they return the players that they had from a season ago, it means that again, this is a very identical matchup compared to 2023. Do I think it's going to be 38-15 again? No, I think West Virginia scores a few more points. I don't think Penn State gets to 38. I could see something like a 31-20, for example. I think that's a fair score, and that slightly covers the spread, but I think the spread is accurate. But now all the West Virginia fans are trying to tell me that this is a guaranteed West Virginia upset, that Penn State has no chance. And that's just not, argue the spread to me. Fine. Argue the spread. But as far as an upset victory, no way.
Yeah, I mean, is this a game where West Virginia keeps it close and I would be shocked? No, I mean, I think there's a path. First game of the year, West Virginia in front of their home fans, they get out to maybe a hot start, get up like 10-0 maybe, and it's like, okay, and Penn State might have to play from behind a little bit, and it's close, and then Penn State, I think, would pull away late in that path. But, I mean, to say that this is a guaranteed, well, West Virginia is going to win, it would be a shock if Penn State somehow wins this game as a 10.5-point favorite. It's just not a way to think of positive way. I mean, if you're a West Virginia fan, you want to think optimistically. It's like, well, we got better as the season went on last year. Penn State, there's some questions, and maybe we can go out, we can give them a great game in the fourth quarter. We got our home fans. Anything could happen in Morgantown, and you never know what could happen there. I'd say, that's absolutely right. That's a possibility that could happen. But to say, Penn State got no chance to go to West Virginia and win is just not true, because as you mentioned, we talked last time about Penn State addressing their issues from last year. It's a lot of similar guys and have improvement. That's the same thing with West Virginia outside of the secondary, where it is a complete overhaul. We're talking about chemistry. There's no chemistry in that secondary for West Virginia going into this game. So, I mean, there's a lot that's got to go right for West Virginia, and that defense concerns me, especially in this game where Penn State, new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, Drew Allar's got something to prove. Those running backs are looking to get out and run and go. And I mean, it's tough for me to think West Virginia's defense is going to be that good right off the bat in week one. And I think Penn State's going to be able to exploit that as much as anything.
You want to talk about chemistry? If there's any hypothetical chemistry issues with Penn State's offense because of a coordinator change, a slight change at wide receiver, offensive line, look at that secondary again, completely overhauled. They're supposed to have 3, maybe 4 new starters in the secondary there. Penn State. And Andy Kotelnicki's smart enough to look at that and say, yeah, let's exploit that weakness. Now, coming up, let's talk about the game plan. What does Penn State want to do? What does West Virginia want to do? Yes, we know that they want to ground and pound and play ball control, but how would Penn State try to neutralize that? That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Tom Allen's game plan should be fairly simple. It really should be, because if you know that West Virginia is going to try to mimic what Michigan did or what Ohio State did, ground and pound, utilize those again, Garrett Greene's talented. They had all 3 rushers that had over 700 yards are back for West Virginia. Same thing's the case for Penn State. You know, your leading rushers are all back for the Nittany Lions, aside from Trey Potts, but Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, and we know what they're going to do at the NFL level. But West Virginia's offense isn't versatile enough to overcome Penn State's defensive game plan. Okay, so you have the talent, but on top of the fact, Penn State's probably going to run a 5-2. They're probably going to stack the box as much as they can. Adam, the receivers that West Virginia has to offer between Traylon Ray and Justin Robinson, Jaden Bray out of the transfer portal, I don't see how any of those 3 are better than AJ Harris, who's a former top 50 recruit who was at Georgia and then transferred to Penn State, Cam Miller, who was a former 4-star, and then you bring in Jalen Kimber, who's seen plenty of college football action and comes up from the SEC conference after he just finished a season with the Florida Gators. So what Penn State's going to rely on is a lot of man-to-man. They're going to rely on man-to-man from those 3 cornerbacks. And then you can stack the box and allow KJ Winston, Jalen Reed to roam as extra linebackers from their safety spots. I mean, it's really, Penn State knows what West Virginia is going to do, and it's how much can you neutralize it? Because West Virginia will get, the Mountaineers will get theirs, but not a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be what you, like you said, they're going to try to run. So Penn State, you counteract that. You're going to stack the box. You're going to play a lot of man. Now, can West Virginia's receivers win those battles? As you mentioned, it doesn't think on paper that Penn State's going to have a problem there. Those corners that Penn State brought in feel like they'll be good enough to be able to handle that matchup, be very successful in this first game. And I think, you stack the box and you try to make it 3rd and long, make Garrett Greene predictable. I think the big thing with Garrett Greene that makes him so fun and such an interesting quarterback is, he can do a lot of things off paper. He's a dual threat quarterback. He can run or pass and keeps you on your heels. But 3rd and long, it's hard to think that they're going to try to run him. I mean, he's not going to be able to get 13, 14 yards on those type of situations. So that's what you kind of have to watch out for. Make them predictable, which is what Penn State did last year, was a lot of 3rd and long for West Virginia, and they weren't able to get anything going in those situations. The early downs, Penn State was winning big. Can they do that again? I think Tom Allen, as you mentioned, probably going to put 5 defensive linemen out there, the 2 linebackers that they trust the most. Kobe King had a great year last year. Put him back there again and see what he can do. Abdul Carter also being as one of your 5 on the edge, could move back if you need to go to more traditional 4-3. Yes. It won't hurt him to move back and then allow those corners and those safeties to do what they do best. That's the game plan that Penn State's going to have, and it's just going to matter, can West Virginia outdo it? Because, I mean, there's nothing really West Virginia can scheme and say, oh, here's what we'll do to counteract that. It's kind of like, well, we're going to run the ball and see what we can do. I mean, we really don't want to throw it deep because Garrett Greene's not a great guy at throwing guys open, and our receivers aren't the best at getting separation. So, I mean, it's going to be a matter of establishing that run, and if Penn State can handle that, West Virginia's going to have a long day offensively.
I mean, I anticipate defensive formations that have Denai Sutton, Abdul Carter, Devon J. Thomas, no longer Devon Elise, Devon J. Thomas, Hakeem Beeman, and Keziah Izzard. You can throw 3 defensive tackles out there and then use your biggest linebackers. Have Dom DeLuca rotate in, periodically with Tyler Elsdon. Tyler Elsdon is getting better from what we've gathered from spring football and over the summer here. That last season was it's not going to be night and day, but he has improved himself. But both of those guys, Dom DeLuca and Tyler Elsdon, are thumping linebackers. Kobe King's your do-it-all 3-down linebacker. But if you want your run defenders in there, you would like Tony Rojas to be, again, what Kobe King is. But if we're talking about strictly your best run defending linebackers, it's Dom DeLuca and Tyler Elsdon, and you have both of them back. And like you said, you can move Abdul Carter back because you have that confidence now in Jameel Lyons if you need to just do whatever. You just need to work on the fly and rotate guys through. But KJ Winston has not missed a tackle in his college football career. Even though he's a safety, he really is as versatile as it gets, just playing around the football. Jalen Reed, too. Like Penn State is modifying its defense where those safeties are going to act as an extra linebacker. So down the stretch of the season, we'll see a 4-2-5, but the best football coaches are able to adapt on the fly, and you have the players to do that. The matchup that I am looking for is Garrett Greene's mobility, rushing ability against who? Kobe King. Is Tony Rojas when he has to sub in? Because if we're saying, hey, they're probably best off running a 5-2, okay, when Tony Rojas has to be that spy essentially for Garrett Greene, is he going to have enough of a veteran mindset to be able to at least go toe-to-toe with Garrett Greene in that X's and O's type of matchup on those given plays?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the big thing. Can the young guys who come in, specifically Tony Rojas, as you mentioned, come in and, be disciplined enough? I mean, the one thing Penn State has is, you don't want to overlook, Bowling Green, who they have after the West Virginia game, but you have Bowling Green, then a bye, then Kent State. So you have that kind of situation where you got two MAC teams at a bye that you can really focus on. Let's put a game plan together that's best suited to beat West Virginia. Then, if we want to, as we mentioned down the season, 4-2-5 is what we think Penn State's going to be their go-to defense. You can then really work on that and kind of fix it out, but really saying, hey, this is what we got to do to beat West Virginia. They're going to run the ball, so here's how we're going to counteract that, and this is the defense we're going to run, and really hammer that in, that this is what we're going to do for this game. In a full week, 2 weeks of preparation, they can really do that, and I think that's going to be the big thing. And Kobe King and Tony Rojas might be the two most important players on that defense. If they're asked to spy Garrett Greene, sees that guy can wreck your defense.
It might be KJ Winston. Winston might be the guy.
They could move KJ Winston up and have him spy as well as one of the safeties. And it's just, they're going to be so important because Garrett Greene can wreck that defense if he's able to get outside and get to the second level and extend plays with the quarterback's feet, because that just adds another element to their offense. If you can negate that, that really puts West Virginia in a hole. And that's where we saw them struggle last year when they weren't able to do that. And if that happens again early in this game, we'll see how, poised they are if they try to panic and try to immediately reset against a very good Penn State defense.
And again, if they're playing from behind, if they're playing with a double-digit deficit, that passing game, those receivers just, I don't think are good enough to match up against AJ Harris, Cam Miller, Jalen Kimber, any combination of the three. Penn State wins that matchup, but there is a lot on their shoulders, because if AJ Harris can't lock his receiver down, Cam Miller, Kimber, if they are going to lose the battles more often than not, then this becomes a whole different ball game. So a lot of the pressure is not necessarily on that front seven, but on those three cornerbacks. And I'd include safety Zach Wheatley in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be so important. We saw in the Ole Miss game that Penn State's corners struggled. Now, granted, it wasn't the corners we kind of expected from Penn State. It was a very different team. They really rehauled, as you mentioned, Kimber and A.J. Harris coming in. Cam Miller will be back, and Zeki Wheatley's that safety that can also cover and kind of more that nickel guy that can play in there as well and do a lot of different things. And I think that's going to be so important for them, because you don't want to allow Garrett Greene to sit there and be able, we're running the ball, and then be able to just throw jump balls up in one-on-one coverage, and West Virginia be able to win those 50-50 balls. Penn State's got to win more than they lose in that situation. That keeps that pressure on the running game for West Virginia to be so good. And that, as we said, just on paper, it looks like they could struggle against a very good Penn State front seven, specifically that front five. So, I mean, the most important thing, as you mentioned, is going to be those corners. Can they cover? Can they hold up and make them one-dimensional just running? And if that's the case, Penn State can be very, very good defensively in this game.
Well, and remember who was on that Ole Miss team. Jackson Dart at quarterback, who is a future NFL quarterback and better than Garrett Greene. Quinshon Judkins at running back, who is, as much respect as I have for Donaldson and White as a dynamic duo, and Jalen Anderson as well. Quinshon Judkins, I think, is better than the three of them combined, and now he's at Ohio State. And those three wide receivers, we talk about how 700-yard rushers are back for West Virginia. Ole Miss had three, I think it was 800-yard wide receivers. So they had three options to go to against inexperienced cornerbacks. That's certainly not the case here for West Virginia.
Yeah, don't want to take a shot at Neil Brown, but Lane Kiffin's one of the best offensive play callers in the country. So I don't think Neil Brown's going to have the Lane Kiffin playbook out there as well to work with. So, I mean, yeah, it's a very different team, but that's going to be the most important thing. Can those corners hold up? Shouldn't be as much of a challenge as it was against those Ole Miss guys, but, how do they hold up against a very, very good Penn State secondary that, we're kind of starting to see, are these transfers really good? It's going to be a great first test for them as Penn State's going to be all in on stopping the run.
On paper, this is a Penn State win. Again, it totally needs to be a dumpster fire if the Nittany Lions are going to lose this game. Multiple turnovers, knock on wood, no injuries. I want these teams to be at full strength when they play this game and they play it through the full 4 quarters. That is what I want to see. The best version of West Virginia versus the best version of Penn State. And on paper, there is one or two scenarios that I see West Virginia defeating a Penn State team. Penn State's going to win this game. It's just a matter of how much. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. That's Adam Sheetz over on the other side. I encourage you to check out his work over on social media. Again, broadcast, he is a professional sportscaster. So if there are any companies out there looking for one of those, Adam Sheetz is your guy. His work will be linked down in the description. Adam, thanks so much for the time, and can't wait to chat some more Penn State athletics in the not too distant future.
Thanks, Zach. Always a pleasure.
And as always, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. If you got an early prediction for Penn State and West Virginia, put it down in the comments section. Let us know your thoughts and which key matchups you're looking for between the Nittany Lions and the Mountaineers. And if you enjoyed this conversation, leave a like on it, share it with friends and family. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And of course, don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.